Story 1. I work as a nurse in a post-surgical unit in the biggest hospital in my city. Patients come from hundreds of miles away to get their operations here. The surgeons are known to be the best. But what we don't tell the patients, what we're not supposed to tell them, is that there are ghosts here. Just like any other hospital, people pass away, and their spirits sometimes linger. Or maybe it is just a fragment of them that remains behind. Something that science can't explain yet. There have been more than a few events that have raised the hair on the back of my neck, and some have sent me into hysterical screaming fits. But those types of reactions are frowned upon in the hospital, so I try to stay calm. There was that time a few months ago when a patient told me she felt like there were 3 other people in the ward room with her, in each of the other 3 beds around her. They were talking back and forth and whispering, she said. But the weird thing was, she was alone in the 4-bed room. I pulled back the curtains and showed her myself. All of the other beds were empty, and there were no visitors or staff in the room with her. As if that weren't disturbing enough, a few weeks later, a different patient said the exact same thing when she had been left alone in the same room. She described it exactly the same way, saying they were whispering back and forth and it was keeping her awake. I felt a chill up my spine when she told me that, but reassured her that the room was empty and she was simply imagining things. People have enough to worry about when they're recovering from surgery. We don't need them fretting about specters and ghosts when they should be worried about physio and discharge appointments, lifting restrictions and medication adjustments. So we keep these stories to ourselves. Some nurses said they couldn't sleep in a certain storage room during breaks on night shift since they'd had too many bad experiences there. When I asked them about it, they said they'd had bad dreams and felt like someone was in the room with them, standing over them while they slept. I didn't believe in those things myself, so I slept in there on the night shift and found out firsthand why nobody else wanted to use it as a nap room during breaks. I had the most realistic waking dream I'd ever had, where I'd awoken in the storage room and felt like someone was in there with me, watching me from the corner of the room, their dark outline visible in the dim room. When I went to turn on the lights, they didn't work, and the door wouldn't open. And for some reason, in my dream, which seemed like reality, I chose to lie back down and go to sleep again, while the thing crept closer and closer, vanishing only to reappear just above me. It felt like my eyes were open the whole time, and I was forced to watch, paralyzed, as it hovered over top of me. For what felt like hours, it was watching me while I slept, as I struggled and was unable to move. I finally came to my senses and finished my break early, going back to work and trying to forget about the horrible experience. But I refused to sleep in that storage room again. There was another event which haunts me to this day, especially since I'm heading in for a night shift right now, in just a few minutes. Another nurse told me a story on the night shift last week, and I've been thinking about it a lot since then, and it's been occupying my mind more and more, especially when I'm alone in the break room at night. We have a staff room where there are 2 small couches and a TV. Some nurses go in there to sleep during breaks on the night shift, and we try our best not to wake them up. She was sleeping on the couch there one night, and a bright light woke her up. There's an adjoining room with a bathroom and lockers, so she figured one of the nurses had gone in there and left the light on. I looked over at the door, she told me. You know how it has that little glass window, and you can see through to the other side? Yeah, I said. I see it every day. So, there's this woman on the other side of the door, and she's looking at me through the glass. I got shivers up my spine when she said this. Maybe because it was the night shift. Maybe because that was where I was going on my break in an hour to sleep, or at least try to. And so I see her there, but she's not really looking at me. She's just kinda staring straight ahead. And the first thing I notice about her is her hair. It was in this very old-fashioned sort of style, not like anything you'd see today. It was like it was from the 72nds, or earlier maybe. And she was wearing these funky blue pinstripe scrubs. And a nurse's cap. You know, nobody wears a cap anymore these days. And those scrubs? They looked like the ones you know in the lobby, how they have those ones on display? From way back when? Yeah, they looked just like that. I was nodding along, able to picture all of it, as if I was there with her. Another nurse walked in and heard us. What are you guys talking about? Ghosts, I replied simply. He scoffed. You guys believe in that stuff? The 2 of us shared a knowing look. He hadn't been working on the floor long enough to have seen them himself, and some people just aren't attuned to these things. The nurse went back to her story. So she's just standing there staring straight ahead. And I thought it was the IV nurse at first, because sometimes they'd come in during the night shift and use the bathroom or whatever. So I yelled at her, "Hey, turn that light off, will ya? I'm trying to sleep in here." But she just kept staring straight ahead. So I just put the pillow over my head and tried to sleep some more. Then when I woke up later on and that light was still on. So I asked around. Nobody came in there during the night. And that room is locked, so it wasn't a patient. And I saw the IV nurse later on and they were not dressed like that. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who it was though. According to her, the woman was the ghost of a nurse who had died driving home after a long night shift and had fallen asleep at the wheel. Based on the description she'd given, an older coworker had recognized her. She'd said that was exactly what an old nurse who used to work there looked like. And from that point on, the nurse who told me this story always remembered to stay awake behind the wheel on the drive home. Every time my eyes start to blink and I'm getting tired, man, I think about that old nurse with the curly gray hair standing behind the glass, and I'm wide awake again. Better than a frickin' cup of coffee, I'll tell you. Something occurred to me as she finished the story. That's really weird. My patient in room 14 told me last night that they saw someone peeking their head in the room and looking at them. And sometimes they would stand in the doorway and just stare at them for a while. She said the person had a very old-fashioned haircut and old-fashioned scrubs. She thought it was a ghost, or maybe a hallucination. Ghosts and hallucinations are commonplace on the post-surgical floor, and sometimes it can be difficult to tell the two apart. Pain medication-induced post-operative delirium is not unheard of, especially in the elderly. She thought it was the Dilaudid. So none of that tonight. Just sticking with Tylenol. Good idea, the other nurse said, and I excused myself. I was somewhat unsurprised to see a woman in blue pinstripe scrubs with a cap looking in at them from the doorway. Despite my terror, I began to walk on shaky legs down the hall towards her. She turned to look at me and went away from the patient's room, going down the side hall at the end of the unit. I ran to catch up with her, needing to see for myself who she was. When I got to the end of the hall, I looked to the left. She was gone, but it had only been a few seconds. I ran down the short length of hallway to the next corridor. This other one was much, much longer. She could not have disappeared so quickly unless she went into a patient room. But again, she was gone. My heart hammering in my chest, I refused to believe it was a ghost. Such things didn't exist. They just couldn't. Room 9 was the only one she could have gone into in such a hurry. I went in and found all of the patients were wide awake, despite the late hour of the night. It was 3 a.m., and everyone should have been asleep. "It's freezing in here. Can you get me a warm blanket?" asked the patient by the door. I told her I would, and she nearly screamed in fright. "Oh my goodness," the old woman said, startled. "I didn't see you there." "So, who were you talking to?" I asked. "The other nurse, the one who just came in." "Where did she go?" I felt a presence behind me and looked to see the shape of something moving, but then it was gone, like a wisp of smoke on a windy day. Not wanting to tell the woman it had been a ghost, I just made up an excuse and told the woman I'd get her a warm blanket. Nothing seemed to help, though. None of the patients in that room slept very well that night, if at all. They kept saying they felt like there was something laying in the bed right next to them. Come to think of it, it's the same room where patients kept imagining other people were in the room with them. Except this time, it really was full. I haven't seen the ghost nurse since that night, and I'm hoping I never do again. It's terrifying, to say the least, since I don't really understand why she's here, and you never know exactly when she's going to show up. I'm heading into work for another night shift now. Wish me luck. Story 2. The Nurse's Life. Hospitals have a smell that clings to your skin and hair long after you leave. It's not just the sharp sting of antiseptic or the faint iron tang of blood. It's something else. Something heavier. Something that lingers in the back of your throat, like smoke. That smell haunted me every time I clocked in for my night shift at St. Luke's Hospital. a sprawling complex in upstate New York that never truly slept. By day, Street Luke's was alive with movement. Patients wheeled to tests, visitors clutching flowers and balloons, doctors rushing from one room to another with clipped efficiency. But at night, when the halls emptied and the lights dimmed, it transformed into something else entirely. The walls seemed closer, the air colder, and every creak and hum felt alive. I was still young when I started at Street Luke's, fresh out of nursing school, full of idealism and determination. My name is Sarah. I thought nursing would be about healing, about holding hands and whispering encouragement to frightened patients. I never thought it would be about survival, about keeping my own sanity intact while working in a building soaked in so much pain, so much death, that the walls themselves seemed to remember. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. I learned the routines: meds at midnight, rounds at 2, vital checks every 4 hours. Night shifts were quieter, in some ways fewer visitors, less chaos, but they carried a weight that days never did. It wasn't just the fatigue of being awake when the world slept. It was the sense that you weren't alone, even when the hallway was empty. There were whispers among the staff, of course. Every hospital has them. Stories traded in hushed voices during breaks, warnings disguised as jokes. Don't nap in the storage room. Don't stay on the 3rd floor past 3 a.m. If you see her, don't follow. I laughed them off, like most new nurses do. We told ourselves these were just coping mechanisms, ways to lighten the heaviness of working in a place where people slipped away every night. But deep down, the stories burrowed into me. The first time I felt it, I was alone in the medication room, restocking syringes. It was just past midnight. The building hummed softly with its mechanical heartbeat. The low drone of the HVAC, the faint beep of monitors down the hall. I bent down to grab a tray from the bottom cabinet, and when I straightened, I swore I saw movement in the reflection of the glass window, a shadow just behind me. I turned. The room was empty. I told myself I was overtired. New shift, new nerves, nothing more. But my hands trembled as I locked the cabinet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing inches away from me, watching. By my 2nd month, the patients had begun to confide in me. The elderly especially. Those who teetered closest to death. They spoke in whispers, their eyes darting toward empty corners. One woman, her breath rattling in her chest, gripped my wrist with surprising strength and hissed, "They walk here. At night. They stand at the foot of my bed." When I asked her who, she only shook her head, lips trembling. I didn't report it. What could I say? That a dying woman thought the hospital was haunted? My supervisors would have told me to focus on charting and stop feeding into patients' delusions. Still, her words stuck with me. Then came the whispers. It was late, maybe 2:30, when I walked past room 214. 4 beds, all empty, the lights off. Yet as I passed, I heard it. Soft voices, murmuring, like people deep in conversation. I froze, my ears straining. The voices weren't clear, just a rise and fall of sound, too low to make out words, but undeniably human. I stepped inside. The room was silent. Every bed was empty. The air was still. Yet my skin prickled as though unseen eyes followed me. I backed out, heart hammering, and for the rest of the night I avoided that hallway entirely. By the time the sun rose and visitors began streaming back in, I had almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. Almost. Hospitals are strange places. They are full of life, yet they house death every single day. Some patients pass quietly, slipping away in their sleep. Others fight until the end, clinging desperately to one more breath. I began to wonder if all that energy, all that desperation and grief lingered. If maybe the walls of Street Luke's weren't just painted with antiseptic white, but with something darker. Something that didn't wash away. I didn't know then just how deep those shadows went, or how close I would come to them myself, because that was only the beginning. Story 3. The Whispering Room. Room 214. Even saying it now, years later, leaves a strange heaviness in my chest. Every hospital has a room like that, the one staff avoid when they can. The one whispered about in break rooms. At Street Luke's. That room was 214. It wasn't cursed in any obvious way. No one had died there in some gruesome accident. At least none I ever heard of. It was just a standard 4-bed patient room. 2 beds on either side. Curtains dividing them. A window that looked down over the parking lot. But 214 carried with it a weight. A thickness in the air, like walking into a place you weren't meant to be. The first patient who told me about it was Mrs. Keene. She'd had her gallbladder removed and was recovering well, an older woman with silver curls and a biting wit. I liked her immediately. She didn't scare easy, but one night after I'd done her vitals, she grabbed my wrist before I could leave. "Don't turn the lights off," she whispered. I thought she was joking. Why not? Her eyes darted to the empty beds around her. Because when it's dark, they come back. Who? I asked, playing along. Her face was pale, serious. The other patients. They sit on the beds. They whisper to each other. Sometimes they argue. Sometimes they just watch. The hairs on my neck rose. I laughed nervously and pulled back one of the curtains to show her the empty space. "No one's here, Mrs. Keene. You're alone tonight." But she only shook her head, her grip tight. "They hide when you come in, but I hear them." I tried to brush it off, but that night, when I passed 214 during rounds, I slowed. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the hall. The room was dark, shadows pooling in the corners. And faintly, so faintly, I thought my mind was playing tricks. I heard it. Whispers. Not one voice, but many. Rising and falling. Conversing. I stepped inside quickly, my shoes squeaking on the floor. The whispers cut off instantly. The silence was worse than the sound. I checked each bed. Empty. I pulled back every curtain. Nothing. I even checked under the beds, like some rookie nurse afraid of monsters. But when I stood in the center of that room, the sense of being watched pressed down on me so hard, my knees nearly buckled. I left, trying to breathe normally, and I told myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation, nerves. But then, 2 weeks later, a new patient was put in 214, a young woman named Jessica, recovering from appendectomy complications. I hadn't told her or anyone else what Mrs. Keene said. But one night around 3 a.m., Jessica rang her call light in a panic. When I arrived, she was sitting upright, pale and trembling. "They won't stop whispering," she said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the other beds. "There are people in here. I can hear them, talking. But when I look," she pulled back her own curtain, revealing nothing. "They're gone. It's driving me insane," I reassured her. Gave her a mild sedative. But when I left the room, my skin crawled. It wasn't just Mrs. Keene. It wasn't just Jessica. Over the years, I heard the same story from half a dozen patients. Always in 214. Always the same. Voices, whispers, unseen figures. One nurse, Maria, told me she refused to take assignments in that room. "I hear them too," she admitted one night in the break room. Her voice was low, almost ashamed. Once, when I went in to check an IV, I heard a man's voice, clear as day, right behind me, say, "Not yet." I turned so fast I dropped the saline bag. No one was there, but I swear to God, Sarah, it was real. After that, I avoided 214 as much as possible. I did my job, of course, but I never lingered. In and out, quick as I could. But avoidance only works for so long. One night, the unit was short-staffed. I was assigned to cover 214 and 2 other rooms at the far end of the hall. It was around 2:45 a.m., the dead hour. Some call it when I went in to check on Mr. Doyle, the only patient there that night. He was a kind old man with heart problems, polite and soft-spoken. "Can't sleep?" I asked gently. His eyes flicked toward the empty bed across from him. "Too noisy," he murmured. A chill ran through me. "Noisy? They won't stop whispering," he said, almost apologetic. I told them to hush, but they don't listen. My blood ran cold. "Who, Mr. Doyle?" "The others," he said simply, and closed his eyes. I stood frozen for a moment, the air heavy and still. Then, faintly, so faintly I could have sworn it came from right next to me, I heard it. A whisper. My throat closed. I spun, looking wildly around the room. Empty beds, curtains still. But the whisper came again, soft and drawn out, like breath against my ear. I bolted. I didn't finish rounds. I didn't chart right away. I fled to the nurse's station, shaking so badly I could barely hold my pen. For the rest of the shift, I avoided 214 unless absolutely necessary. When morning came and the sun spilled through the windows, the dread eased, but it never left. Not completely. 214 wasn't just a patient room anymore. It had become something else. A doorway, a gathering place, a reminder that the hospital's walls were never empty. And deep down, I knew it was only the beginning.